The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of Hidden Horsepower presented by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. I'm Joe Costello, and we have got another great podcast episode for you. I am joined, as is normally the case, by the Director of Technical Sales, Keith Jones, whose new title is just Get It Done, Keith Jones. And Keith, welcome back to another episode. Here we go again.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe. Things have changed in this world since the last time we spoke. It's a whole new planet and a whole new day, but we're here meeting it with a smile on our face every day and trying to do the absolute best job we can, bringing people the details and as you said, the hidden little secrets about how to release a little more horsepower, especially through ring seal. And like I say, looking at a new future here.
And it is the case. I love how Keith always gives us like a little preamble of what's going on in the world at the time of the episode. It is great. We encourage everybody to go back and subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can find them all on Total Seal's social media. On this episode, I'm very interested in what we've got going on because we have Lake Speed Jr., who at Total Seal wears many hats. I asked him for his title, and he said head troublemaker. And so let's dive immediately in and bring into the show, also from Total Seal. So both of you guys are out there. It's like a conference call at Total Seal, Mr. Lake Speed Jr. Lake, welcome to Hidden Horsepower for the first time.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. I mean, I've listened to every episode and just excited to be here. And obviously my buddy Keith over there, you know, we've known each other for a long time, and this is just kind of great to be together and great to be here.
I love the fact that we're all together, and what we have been doing with these shows has been, I've received a lot of positive feedback. Frankly, sometimes it's over my head, but that's how you get smarter. You got to hang out with people smarter than you.
Exactly. That's why I try to hang out with Keith and Matt Hartford and guys like Ben Schrader, who was on the show, is a good buddy of mine. Yeah, to learn as much as you can.
So I expect you guys to educate me on this episode, but also have a little back and forth about the significance of what we are doing, speaking with all these engine builders, but also educating the person who isn't that far along. And Keith always says, like, make your first call before you even, buy your parts. Like, tell us what you're thinking about doing, and we can set you on this path. Now, Lake, before we get into that, we want to talk about your path. I know our listeners are saying to themselves, Lake Speed Jr. There's not too many guys out there in the world named Lake Speed. And many of us watched your dad growing up. NASCAR driver, karting racer, some incredible racing statistics. Talk a little bit about how you came up in your racing legacy family.
That's one of those things that my first memories in life are at a racetrack. When I was born, my dad was still racing go-karts, traveling all around the country. We had a mail-order go-kart parts business called Speed Karts. So that's what paid the bills. And then to, promote that, Dad traveled around racing go-karts against guys like Lynn Haddock, Scott Goodyear. There's a litany of people that came up in karting, that my dad raced against back in the 70s, and ultimately got to racing over in Europe, and he raced against some really greats. He actually beat Ayrton Senna in 1978 for the World Go-Karting Championship. He raced against Teo Fabi, Ricardo Patrese, Alain Prost. I mean, if you're an F1 guy, my dad raced against a lot of the heroes and was fortunate enough in 1978 to beat him, and since then he's actually the only American to ever win the World Karting Championship. So that was my start in life, really was in racing, and I've never been able to shake that. It's just in my blood.
Well, let's just simmer on that for a minute. And that, and frankly, diving into the Wikipedia and going into the internet and finding out about that your dad, Lake Speed, went toe-to-toe with Ayrton Senna and defeated him. That for a World Karting Championship in 1978 when I was 5 years old. The talent that must have been present to do that without mistake. But think of the equipment. Like nowadays, the modern karts, the modern engines, the modern everything we have, the stuff he was doing it in. That's amazing to me.
Well, Keith already knows this. So my dad and I do vintage go-kart racing. So if you really want to see some interesting stuff, there's a whole group called the Vintage Karting Association, and they probably have 10, 15 races a year. And my dad and I have been doing this for about 10 years together, going back and running these races. Dad's 72 years old. We have, the actual 78 championship kart. We've got some replicas and all of that. Dad's still faster than everybody. He's still faster than me. I mean, it's crazy. And the thing is, when you go back and you said head-to-head against Senna was the factory, the kart company's called DAP, D-A-P. So he was the factory racer for DAP. My dad was a privateer. He didn't have any factory help. And in fact, the only reason he was probably able to win that year was because there's a company called Birrell out of Italy, and Dad was, using Birrell chassis. He was the Birrell importer into the U.S., and he was over there, and the Birrell guys were just kind of impressed with this, crazy American guy and him and his buddy, over there trying to do this. And Teo Fabi was the factory Birrell guy, and he crashed out in qualifying. And so Dad had qualified for the finals, and they basically run 3 heats in the finals to determine the championship. And they basically start over from points after qualifying. So clean slate, last 3 heats. They're sitting on the starting grid. Teo Fabi walks up, hands my dad 4 tires and says, "Put this on." Because he was a factory guy. He had the good tires a second a lap faster.
Whoa.
Yep. With the factory guy tires. So Dad had that only one set. He goes out, wins the first heat, just drives to the front, passes everybody, and wins. Second heat, he doesn't get a new set of tires. Everybody else does. And that's when, he's up there trying to defend, and Senna finally gets to his tail, and on the last corner, last lap, Senna's been dogging him. Dad knows Senna's going to go for him. He knows he's going to dive bomb him. So Dad just moves over, kind of crowds him down, makes him have a bad line. As soon as he feels and hears Senna kind of make that move, Dad, off the gas, jumps to the outside, and basically does a slide job on Senna, because Senna's committed. He's down to the bottom. There's no way he can make a good exit. All right, so Senna goes by Dad on the inside. Dad arcs it out, passes him back off the corner in a drag race, and beats him to the finish line.
Wow.
He's world champion at that point. All he has to do is just finish the last heat, and he's world champion.
Unbelievable.
Like
unbelievable.
That was kind of neat.
I get to talk to a guy whose dad beat Ayrton Senna in a race. Like, that's pretty crazy in and of itself. But that wasn't his only great successes. Many of us grew up, seeing Lake Speed as one of the names in a list of drivers. Maybe our NASCAR fandom was kind of coming online. We were watching these races, early races on ESPN, etc. He was always in the top 10, was always a name on the screen, right? There were many other names that never made the screen. He was always on the screen. He ended up in the International Karting Foundation Hall of Fame, the Karting Hall of Fame. But in 1985, second place to Bill Elliott at the Daytona 500. And, of course, Bill Elliott in 1985 at Daytona, that was one of the more dominating performances we've seen. 136 laps led, where no one was catching Bill and Ernie Elliott on that given weekend, but Lake Speed finished second.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, that year, Elliott with the number 9 Ford, they were in a class by themselves. It was just, no one was touching those guys at the Speedway races that year. So, Dad finished second, and the interesting story there is, into 84, Dad was basically done. He had cashed out the Speed Karts deal in '79, and liquidated it and tried to get into NASCAR, or got into NASCAR. Started running. We had our own team, but really didn't own anything. We were basically just paying guys over here in the Carolinas to help him along, and he was running in, 83. He raced for Haas Ellington. But Haas, basically, all of his parts are used parts. They ran on Junior Johnson's used stuff. And like you said, Dad ran top 10, or actually probably ran about top 5 or blew up in 83 every race. It's like, okay, if you look at his stats, he either finished top 10 or he blew up, or wrecked. That was how 83 went. And 84 was a struggle year too. And, things were pretty bad back then, right? That economy was pretty tough. 85, he had nothing. And they decided, okay, well, either I'm going to pack this thing back up and go back to Mississippi or whatever. Wasn't sure. And then Bobber Healy and Butch Mock and Dicker Healy, the Raymock guys, they told my dad, hey, why don't we don't have a sponsor. We got cars. We have an engine shop. Let's just go to Daytona together. Let's just see. And they said, okay, sure. So Dad and the Raymock guys go to Daytona, and they qualified. I mean, the finishing second to Bill wasn't really a fluke that year. They had ran good in practice, finished well in the qualifying race, and looked pretty good. They got the sponsorship from Nationwide Auto Parts the night before the race. And this is back in the days when, we didn't have decals. You had sign painters. Literally, the car had wet paint on it from the sign painters painting Nationwide on the car the morning of the race. And went out there and finished second. And it was just an incredible, miracle to get the sponsorship and then finish second. And then Nationwide signed on to sponsor the car for the rest of the year. I actually got a picture on my desk up here. I'm looking at it right now. My dad in the Nationwide Auto Parts car, and that kind of was a pivotal moment in his career that he stuck, and then in 88, we had our own team, built our own engines, built our own chassis, everything right there at the shop behind the house. Dad still has the shop, still got cars and stuff in there. We won Darlington in 88 and the Wynn's Kmart car. That was the first year we really had somewhat competitive money and somewhat competitive resources to the Childresses and all that. And, and it's Darlington. It wasn't a fluky, not to say that other guys, won at fluky races, but you win at Darlington, that's a driver's track. You don't just luck into winning Darlington. And he dominated. 367 laps led. He killed it, Great day. And I was fortunate to be there. That was a race during the school year, but happened to be spring breaks. I got to go.
Wow.
So that was kind of neat,
Well, hearing you talk about it, and then the career goes on, and it's just one of those situations where I think, and hopefully our listeners, they realize, like, you see someone and they're a name on a screen, but behind that someone and all the things you're watching is like a real life and all these amazing things. And what I have taken out of it is that if he was around in another time, like now, things would be totally different, because you mentioned doing so much with your own parts, your own shop, your own teams, like trying to run your own campaign, your own cars, which is just so hard now. And finishing, 10th, 8th, 11th, like now that's really good, right? Back then, you're outside of the top 10 or you're in, running around 10th. People are like, now you're running top 10. You're a lifer. You're there forever. And it's just very interesting. One final note I did want to mention for the Earnhardt fans out there, 1998 Daytona 500. I don't know that Dale Earnhardt wins that Daytona 500 without that late race caution. Guess who was in it?
Yeah, my dad.
So the Earnhardt fans have got to have a love somewhere deep down. John Andretti, Lake Speed get together, and the caution comes out, and Dale Earnhardt wins the Daytona 500. If not, could have been Bobby Labonte. He was coming on strong. They still had a long way to go, which is a perfect tie to your career arc, which let's talk about it. As a lubrication specialist, Joe Gibbs Racing, driven motor oil, when that brand came on the scene, you were a big part of it. So how did Lake Speed Jr., get involved? Obviously, you already said you drive, but you ended up as an industry guy.
Yeah, so, the interesting kind of parallel, the twists and turns of life that, my dad, finished second to Bill Elliott in the Melling-sponsored car there in 85. Well, he ended up finishing his career, like you said, driving for Melling, the number 9 car. That was it in 1988 or 1998, Daytona 500. And I actually was working for Melling at that time. So I went to work for the guys at Melling in 1998. Just a guy in the shop. Yeah, it was one of the things that, my dad made me go to college because he was like, you got to go to college, but really had that passion for racing, and tried to have a real job for a little while and hated that. So I went to work at Melling and was working there. Then just getting into being a NASCAR team member and working on all those things. We helped work a internship program with the University of Tennessee, where I went to school with the engineering department and had an engineer in there, and we're doing development work, trying to do things to gain power on speedway. So we had a chassis dyno, and we tried all kinds of different things, back to this hidden horsepower, right? That's what we were looking for. What can we do to make more power so that engine, so that car can go faster, and that led to me going to work for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2004. And, Mark Cronquist, the head engine guy at Gibbs, said, okay, listen, you're going to be in charge of our oil program, which means you get to know everything in this engine that touches oil, which is pretty good because I'm a guy who loves engines, and oil touches most parts in the engine. Like if you ask me about, valve seat materials and stuff like that, I kind of know, but that wasn't something that I was told about, because that wasn't something that oil touched. But things like, say, piston rings and bearings and things like that, that was, part of, my domain. And that's really, where I first kind of came in contact with Total Seals, because as we were developing the oils, and we weren't smart enough to think about this, but we were developing the oils. Well, we were using Total Seal piston rings as part of that package. And, as a oil guy, really what I am, I'm a tribologist. And tribology is this fancy word that's really the study of friction, wear, and lubrication. And, ring seal, what you guys have talked about over and over again on this show, which is the key to optimizing the power in the engine. My analogy, ring seal is like soup. It's not just the broth. It's not just the chicken. It's not just the spices. It's not just the vegetables. It's all of it coming together. Ring seal isn't just the piston. It's not just the piston ring. It's not just the cylinder wall finish. It's not just the oil. It's all of them coming together. And that's what we did at Joe Gibbs Racing, is we were looking at different lubricants. We were trying different things with Hone. Obviously, they were working closely with Keith and Matt and all the guys at Total Seal, trying different ring packages, different thicknesses and things like that. We were doing in pistons, we worked a lot with Bill Miller on pistons. We tried all of those things, and it was that package that came together over time. And, that's kind of where my relationship with Total Seal got started, was that, as we were developing these oils, we were developing them in concert with the rings. And then that's where our conversation with Keith, and I was like, we were using break-in oil, and we were doing a break-in process. And, lo and behold, we could have results with certain rings that no one else could get because of our process. And that was just kind of a neat thing to learn, because we weren't so smart that we saw that coming. We just kind of looked at it in the rearview mirror and said, oh, wow, we made this huge horsepower gain and reduced blow-by and increased vacuum as part of this combination. And, wow, that ring really made a big difference. And part of it was that process, is that soup, ring. That's really what my passion is about ring seal, which is why I'm so excited to be here at Total Seal, because, oil is part of that, but you can only go so far with oil, and tribology is more than just oil, right? That's why I'm excited to be able to work on parts.
And that's why people are clicking subscribe right now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and writing a review. If they love the engine building, the science of engine building, the engineering feat, you're going to want to hear the next couple of episodes, because you mentioned Mark Cronquist, head engine builder at Joe Gibbs Racing, as well as Ron Shaver from Shaver Specialties Racing Engines. Two gentlemen are going to be our next couple of guests on the show. Lake, you are going to be my co-host for that. I'm excited about that. We'll get into it. But Keith, I want you to jump in now and talk about those early days working with Lake, with him as a client, as a customer, as a partner, but not within the company, outside the company, and trying to get creative like that. You have told us over the first several episodes, like that's where it all starts, right? Getting creative conversations, setting out the goals. What are we trying to achieve? That must have been a great project.
It's been a real asset working with Lake and a real asset having Lake working with us. It's great to have him on board. In the early days, it was like Lake said, everything is a soup. It's a combination. I call it links in the chain. If one link in the chain fails, everything fails. So, in the early days working with Lake, oil really wasn't thought about. It was just, it's oil. And he really helped pioneer this progression in oil, kind of like the way we pioneered the progression in piston rings when we first really started getting active in trying to develop new ring technologies and ring coatings. Rings were just thought of as, hey, it's a ring. You put it in there and away you go. And, at the time with getting involved with Lake, oil was kind of, you go out, you buy a quart of Valvoline and you put it in and there you go. And through his efforts and knowledge and the testing and the guys like Mark and Joe Gibbs and, really, really pushing, the oil technology boundaries to find out how light of viscosity we can get away with, reduce the friction. As Lake said, tribology is such an important part of this, this program's progress of finding the right coatings, the right ring thicknesses, and that constant experimentation and working with the guys that allow us to throw those ideas. Let's play with how much, barrel drop can we put on the ring? Can we offset the barrel on the ring? How does it respond to this coating? Whether it's, titanium or diamond like carbons or titanium dioxide, there's a whole list of different things, and all of these react differently. And working with him to develop the right coating with the right oil and again, as he said, and cylinder finishes. What is the right finish? And it's a constant testing, and it's still being tested today. And still developing. We're always working on those new, what is the next thing? So, getting involved with Lake in those early days of that, really, again, helped us. It wasn't just us, as a group, piston, rings, cylinder, the oil, all of these things have to work together, helping to elevate this to the next level. So, again, it's been great working with him for all these years, and it's absolutely fantastic to have him on board here at Total Seal.
Now, Lake, let's talk about Joe Gibbs Racing and Mark Cronquist and Ron Shaver, our next two guests that are going to be coming up on the future episodes, which, these guys are important to you in your career, but also important to you in your life. It's got to be pretty cool. You're going to get to, go full geek out on engines with these two.
Oh, I know it is. It's so much fun. Again, Mark is a guy that just, I said earlier, he changed my life. Being able to be involved in, the Joe Gibbs Racing engine program during that time period, 2004 up to 2010, is kind of the halcyon days of NASCAR. The money was nearly unlimited. I mean, we would get to the end of the season, and it was pretty common to Mark to come to me and say, here's 5 brand new engines that were backup motors. Do whatever you want to with them. They're yours. Have them. Try whatever you want to try in terms of oil. I was the oil guy, right? So do it. And we're going to measure blow-by. We're going to look at vacuum. We're going to look at power. We're going to do a 500-mile race simulation. And then we'll tear it down, and then we're going to verify the power. It was you couldn't you can't do that anywhere else today right now, probably outside F1, that has that kind of resource still. And what we learned as part of a group, we had, and it wasn't just me. We had a great group of people. There were some really great people at a company called Lubrizol. Several of those guys have retired and moved on since then. A guy like John Martin, Bill Abraham, Doug Jane. There's some really great, smart people. And we were able to try a lot of crazy things. I mean, some stuff we would do, we're like, okay, fun story. Obviously people know viscosity makes, helps, you go to lower viscosity things tend to free up power just because there's viscous drag. We tried making a water-based oil, which, Keith knows this, from honing, there's a lot of, grinding fluids and honing fluids sometimes that are water-based, where you're mixing oil in with water, which, normally oil and water separate. Well, with some creative chemistry, you can make an emulsion and then have that cooling effect of water and have still the lubricity of the oil. So we actually built an engine, and I should probably wait for the Mark episode and let Mark tell the whole story. But in fact, I will. I'll just tease it at that point. Let Mark finish the story on what we did with this water-based oil. But we were trying things like that, and I remember one thing we tried that made really good power early on, and then we tried to run a 500-mile race simulation, and we got about 100 miles into it, and the blow-by went off the chart. The oil consumption went crazy. And we were like, okay, I had to stop. Okay, so what that it made 5 horsepower more brand new? It couldn't make it 100 miles in a race. So you learn things like that. It's one of the key things about oil is that, and Keith knows this because we've soldiered through this whole process, ring seal. You want the oil on the wrist pin side of the piston and not on the crown side of the piston. Yeah, that's the job of the ring.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
Right. And I say that, wrist pin side versus crown side, not top versus bottom, because, there are flat engines and there are radial engines. So that top bottom doesn't always work in every engine. But regardless of what engine it is, you want the oil on the wrist pin side, not the piston crown side,
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime we're going to get into oil migration, obviously we're going to pull octane ratings down on fuel once we get into the combustion chamber. We're bottom line, we do it long enough, bad enough, we're going to throw the engine into detonation, and that's a very, very destructive force. Not only do we lose horsepower, I'm just, as of yesterday, working with a gentleman that I've been working on, cylinder finishes on and getting his blow-by numbers down and getting his vacuum numbers up in the crankcase, and he's picked up double-digit horsepower. And all of this is simply because once we've gotten all of that right, he didn't realize how much detonation he was getting into this engine. It's a 10,000 plus RPM engine, and I saw signs of it in parts that he would send me, but he didn't see the signs. And I kept explaining, you've got a detonation problem. It's no, it's not. I go, yes, it is. And finally kind of got that through to him, and he's worked on this and really gotten it sealed up, and he's picked up, I can't say exactly what it is, but he's picked up 50 horsepower. And it's simply because we've eliminated that issue in the engine. So detonation is definitely not a good thing. And I get people that look at, we're talking about trying to reduce friction in engine and getting, all of these, reducing that drag. And many people looking at, two-ring pistons. And in certain applications, engines that I like to refer to as clean sheet of paper, that have very, very low windage in the bottom. They've really got the lower end under control. They're designed to be a two-ring piston. They work well, but you get into situations with older drag race pistons, things like that, where they just pull the second ring out. And one of the things they kind of lose track of is, they pulled the second ring out, so they've lost that backup oil scraper to the top ring. It also holds a little, it reduces blow-by as well to back up to both rings. But what they lost sight of is that they had to put more oil ring tension in it. They lost that scraping effect of the second ring, and they had to put more oil ring tension in it to dry the engine back up because they would lose power because of that oil migration. Where with a three-ring package, if you use real light, real thin, low tension, the overall friction is actually less. The overall force on the board is lower. So that's kind of an awakening with a lot of guys as well, realizing that they can actually get a lower all-around drag with the three-ring versus the two-ring, because not only do we want to get the friction out, but we've got to keep that engine dry. We've got to keep that combustion chamber dry. A dry engine's always a happy engine, and we can lean on the tune-up harder.
Lake, in terms of longevity, you're talking about 500-mile racing, and Keith has got a drag racing background, as do I. We love, motorsports of all kinds, but it's very different building horsepower for longevity. You got to go on a 500-mile race. You don't know what lies ahead with that, as opposed to the quarter-mile guys who, as you just mentioned, like it makes a lot more horsepower, but doesn't last a long time. A lot of the drag racers, they're okay with that. Talk a little bit about that balance.
Well, balance is the key word. Yeah, that's something, the chemical guy, and that's what I look at in engines as a big, giant chemical reactor. Balance is key in chemistry, and that's what you have to have. You have to strike that balance. Just like Keith said, just because it makes power doesn't mean that it's actually going to be what provides the durability. And like the example Keith was just talking about, with this guy that had the detonation deal, it may be making power, but if it's getting oil into the combustion chamber, you're still not making the kind of power it could make if you could dry it up. just that it made more power, it doesn't mean that you've actually got it right necessarily. There still can be some tuning that could still happen and some tweaks that could make it even better. And that's really where, one awesome thing about Total Seal is because we do piston rings for literally anything that has a piston in it, from compressors to, off-road trucks to, airplanes, not just racing stuff. Because we do all of that, the database, the experience level that is in those four walls there in Phoenix, Arizona, unmatched. I mean, that's why it's not just like a, trite little saying, make us the first call, not your last call. It really should be, because when you call us and you talk to a guy like Keith or Kevin or Bobby or, whoever, at our place, that we can help you because we see so many different things. And sometimes it's like the guy Keith was talking about, you see that same part over and over again and you just kind of take for granted, well, that's just what it's going to do. But then we can help you by bringing in that other experience. I mean, Keith helped me tremendously when I was at Driven with oil stuff, because we could do something and it works just fine in the engine that we're building with the hone we have, with the fuel we have, could work fantastic. But it works terrible when you just change the fuel or just change the hone, and that's where, Total Seal to me was the best place to lean on in terms of tribology, because just the diversity of experience, because Total Seal does so many rings for so many different types of engines, that breadth of experience is invaluable in terms of how to get better and make sure that you're not going to step on a landmine. That's where, Keith and those guys are just that over 100 years of combined engine building and racing experience within those four walls on the tech lines. That's invaluable.
And so on that note, we will bring to a close this episode of Hidden Horsepower by Total Seal. But, Lake, we got to give you the full guest treatment. One thing that Keith and I always ask our guest is, and we'll ask you now, for the upstart engine builders, the younger folks out there who are getting into this hobby or taking it on professionally, who realize that they do not have that 100 years of experience, but they do have the desire and the want to factor. What recommendations would you give to them on how to be successful?
One, start, building some relationships. Don't be afraid to start at the bottom. About a year ago, I got the opportunity to go down to Houston, Texas, and speak at the School of Automotive Machine to their group. And when I was talking to those guys and say, you're going to get out of there with a degree and you've had the experience there at the school. Look at that as you just learn the language. Like, when you're getting into this business, make the analogy that you're going to a foreign country, and what you're learning in school there is the language. You haven't learned the culture yet, and you're not really a citizen yet, but you've just learned the language. That's helping you. So if you come in and have that apprentice mindset, that just because you know the words doesn't mean you know the answers. If you come in with that perspective, there's a ton of opportunity. I mean, Keith, even despite the craziness in the world today, there's a lot of guys out there, they're covered up with work. They got more work than they can shake a stick at right now. And so there's a lot of opportunity in this business. You just have to start building relationships, and a big part of that is that people in this industry will help you if they see that you're humble enough to have that apprentice mindset. And I think that's really key. And I would say a resource to look into, and I got to give a shout out to one of our previous guests, is Ben Strader. Yeah, Ben's program out at EFI University is fantastic. If anybody is serious about a career in this and you're still kind of new to it, set aside the money, save the money to then go out there to Ben's school and do that. Ben's a great resource. He'll teach you, and I think that's a great way to get started and move into this as a career.
Excellent. Keith, any final questions for Lake or thoughts for Lake as we get ready to pass the baton of the co-hosting duties for a couple of episodes from Keith Jones to Lake Speed Jr.? You got any thoughts for Lake?
Well, I just wanted to, again, congratulate him and thank him for being here. I just wanted to touch base on what Lake said about, people wanting to get into this industry. In the very, very late years of my father's life, he was a school teacher, and he taught automotives. And one of the things is you got to have the passion. You got to have the love. You got to want to do this. You got to want to be involved. If you've got that passion, then like they say, it'll never be a day at work. It's going to be a day doing something you enjoy and something that you love. So, like I say, be passionate about it and come at it with passion. And, the relationship between ourselves is always, he and I have always worked together so well because, like he brought up the oil thing, and with the amount of people that we see and we talk to every day from every end of this industry, you see certain things and certain patterns, and like that conversation would start. Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I'm seeing these guys having this going on, and what makes their application different than this application? We're always doing that research and development to try to figure out why they're seeing what they're seeing and what we can do to make it better. And it's just been great. It's been a true honor to work with them all these years. And as a little note to some of the people out there, it was a very odd situation. And I know Lake will remember this. We were at the SEMA show last year, and I knew at the time that he was coming to work for us, and he knew at the time he was coming to work for us, but we didn't know that we each knew. And I got to tell you, that was about the strangest time I've ever had with Lake. Is we're both kind of standing there chit-chatting. We're both just kind of quiet and really don't know what to say. It was weird. What do you think, Lake?
You're no kidding, man. Yeah, Keith's my brother from another mother. I'm just telling you right now. I mean, we've worked so well together. We're both that get it done kind of guy. And you're right. It's like we've never had an odd conversation in our life, but that was the weirdest, most awkward thing at SEMA this year. Yeah, we both knew, but neither one of us knew that the other one knew. So it was bizarre.
That is hysterical.
To say the least.
That's what just listening to you guys go back and forth is very interesting and informative, and I know that the audience to Hidden Horsepower is loving it. But we've got good things coming ahead, Lake. We've got Mark Cronquist. We've got Ron Shaver. The next couple of episodes, you're going to be in the co-host chair, and I am so looking forward to it. We're going to have a good time. To the audience out there, click subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, follow all the social media for Total Seal on Instagram. Of course, everywhere you get your social media. And frankly, I think we've got some good things that lie ahead. Gentlemen, thank you so much for spending time with us today and continuing to open our eyes about just all the different layers. Frankly, that's what it's all about. Like many, many layers that goes into this. You don't just assemble an engine. You have to really think about it. And like we said, with Keith, you'll be sitting there waiting by the phone. If they do have a question or they want to start that conversation, what should they do?
Oh, just reach out to us. I mean, our toll-free is 800-874-2753. My extension is 203. Or you can simply drop me an email, keithj@totalseal.com, and I will answer any and all questions and help guide you down the path the very best that I can.
Thank you very much, Keith. And Lake, we got a couple more episodes coming up, so everyone's got to get ready. I'm looking forward to it. How about you?
I'm super excited about it. And, of course, Keith set the bar very high on this, so I will do my best not to screw it up.
There it is. Everyone's got to have goals. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys taking the time here on this edition of Hidden Horsepower. Thank you both.
Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Hidden Horsepower by Total Seal. Remember, you're spending money on parts. You want to go fast. Make your first call to the folks at Total Seal. And as we said, those episodes are upcoming, so you want to subscribe. My name is Joe Costello. Thank you so much. You can find me on Twitter as well, at WFOJoe. And stay tuned. New episodes coming up of Hidden Horsepower by Total Seal. Thank you, everyone.